West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin and Vermont Democratic Senator Peter Welch are proposing term limits for Supreme Court justices. Senator Manchin, who's retiring at the end of the year, wrote on X, "I'm proud to introduce legislation with Senator Peter Welch that would establish 18-year term limits for justices of the United States Supreme Court." He added, "The current lifetime appointment structure is broken and fuels polarizing confirmation battles and political posturing that has eroded public confidence in the highest court in our land."
Justice Clarence Thomas was appointed by George H.W. Bush and is now 76 years old. Justice Alito is 74 years old, and Justice Sonia Sotomayor is 70 years old.
And this will go absolutely nowhere. So what else is there to say? There's no reason for Republicans to consider term limits for Supreme Court justices. They control the court now. They're going to control the court even more so at the end of this Trump term in all likelihood. Unless Sonia Sotomayor holds out for the entire 4 years and then Trump is replaced by a Democrat, which could happen. But I would expect some retirements of the elder conservative. I mean, maybe Clarence Thomas wants to be on the Supreme Court until he literally dies. That could be the case. Sure. But I suspect at least Alito will in fact retire during this term, be replaced by a younger conservative, which is, prolonging the Democrats shouldn't despair. The president changes hands every 4 years. It could go either way. Congress could change, although there's a lot of problems in the Senate for Democrats. The Supreme Court is going to be under Republican control for the rest of our lives. That's just reality. Sorry, guys, you lost.
That may well be the case. But let's elevate the discussion above partisanship and tribalism here.
Yes.
It seems to me it's quite a good idea.
We're winning, but now we'll change the rules. I don't know about that,
I mean,
Niall.
you see,
I don't know, my friend.
That's the problem. That's where the problems arise, is that all these debates get bogged down into who has the advantage right now. It's like when popular vote versus electoral college is discussed, it actually just becomes who has the advantage.
Right.
Should the District of Columbia have a senator? Democrats say yes, because there would be a Democratic two Democratic senators. Republicans say no, because it would be two Democratic senators. On the topic,
it should just be part of Virginia or Maryland.
No,
that's my answer to that
should be an
solution.
Independent.
Oh yeah, well no, we're not adding those three little representatives.
Anyway, on term limits for Supreme Court justices, I think it's quite a good idea, because in elected office, if somebody is obviously infirm, not thinking of anyone in particular, then you can get removed by the voters, and on the Supreme Court you cannot. And the idea of having an 18-year term, which seems long enough to protect someone from obvious political pressures, but is still a finite term, that seems a reasonable and plausible idea to me.
Yeah, look, it's fine.
It's fine.
In an ideal world, a system of a little bit like the Senate, where two Supreme Court justices or one or two come up for retirement during every term of a president. So the president's going to get, you stagger it, so the president gets one or two Supreme Court new appointments every single time, or maybe it's just one, depending on how long the term is. That would be a fine system. Nothing wrong with it. That's just not the one they have. And if we were, starting from scratch and revising our system from the beginning, sure, sounds fine. But it's just not going to happen now.
One of the things I always find interesting with our conversations is that I can never tell what you're going to be impassioned about and what you're going to be like, yeah, whatever, it doesn't really matter. If we have a 96-year-old justice, 96-year-old people can be mentally sharp, of course, but does that not give you any pause, that kind of scenario?
Certainly it does. It gives me pause for the senators all the time. We have these very old senators who have to weigh in on less abstract questions, very specific policy relating especially to tech, that it comes out so clearly in those hearings every time they've hauled Mark Zuckerberg before them, and they just asked idiotic questions.
What's
betraying
the internet?
a fun, how do I add a friend on my? It's just like, oh my God, these people are in charge of us. I can't even believe it. So yes, I would share that concern for the Supreme Court. But although they can technically, if someone is just incapacitated or able, they can meet without that person as happens.
But the thing is, with very old senators, or obviously with President Biden, the vote now, voters in Senator's case can throw them out.
Sure.
In Biden's case, it was the Democratic Party who leaned on him until there was no other option available. But had he gone forth as the Democratic nominee, voters could and likely would have said, nah, he's just too old. That's the end of that, which they don't, obviously they don't have the right to do with Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, and an 18-year term limit or some time frame would be the right way to do it. I much prefer that to the proposal I've heard from some people that there should be a mandatory age of retirement.
Right.
But you and I know that some people past 75 are perfectly sharp, including in our own government, and haven't slowed down at all. Others are slowing down maybe even before then. So it's not really, it's too arbitrary in terms of the expected ability of people at that stage of their life. But again, fine with an 18-year term limit. It's just never going to happen. And you asked why I don't have a lot of passion. I can't muster much enthusiasm or an interest for tweaking like the procedural aspects of our government because it's just never going to happen. We're never going to do that again. We're too polarized. It takes too much consensus to fundamentally revise aspects of the Constitution. We don't have anything approaching consensus in modern American society, so it can't happen. And at the end of the day, right, just tweaking the rules or changing it doesn't excite me. I would love to have ranked choice voting. I vote for it when it was on the ballot in D.C. I voted for it. I think that would be a great improvement to our system. There are things that would be good. They're just not what, I don't know, doesn't tickle my fancy. I'm for them.
No, yeah. I mean, not to take us into too esoteric an area here, but I wonder that lack of consensus that you talk about, where there won't really be any fundamental changes to the procedure of American government. I wonder if that actually feeds into public frustration, because if you look at polling, it's not as if a large number of people think that American governance is going splendidly and all is serving the will of the people and the gears are just moving along smoothly. And does that lack of consensus, in a way, increase people's anger at our government that they consider dysfunctional, separate from their particular ideological leanings?
Well, certainly. I mean, the problem is that our system of government is flawed in many ways. I mean, parliamentary systems, like you're familiar with, have a lot of advantages over our system. To be clear, I mean, what I like about our system is the ironclad protections for certain rights in our Bill of Rights. The separation of powers is all good, but really the winner-take-all nature that so empowers a two-party system. And then when you have a two-party system, it becomes very really like a game, like from a game theory perspective. I mean, as someone who plays like a lot of competitive board games, if you play the game over and over and over again, the strategy emerges and people sort themselves. Like we used to have very liberal Republican members of Congress and very conservative Democratic members of Congress, and like dramatically, like the 5 most liberal Republicans were more liberal than the 5 most conservative Democrats, but it doesn't make sense if you're a liberal to be a Republican, and it doesn't make from a winning the game perspective. You're just thinking about operating as how do the Republicans maximize their control of the government? How do Democrats maximize their control of the government? So what occurred over time is a sorting where, no, if you're going to be a conservative, you're going to be a Republican, here's your strategy to win. If you're going to be a liberal, you're going to be a Democrat, here's your strategy to win. People don't split ticket as nearly as much as they used to. Say like, well, I'm a Republican, but that Kennedy fellow, he's sure got a charming smile, so I'm voting for him. That doesn't happen anymore because that's not optimal from a game theory strategy of advancing your political party's interests to sometimes vote against it, which is why much less of that happens. So that's what is producing the dysfunction, is that people are playing the game of politics at a more competitive and serious level than previously in American history, because it just took that long to sort out how to work the system to advantage your political coalition.
Which also in turn leads to geographical polarization. Right. A lot of those liberal Republicans you were talking about were northeastern Republicans, kind of Jacob Javits type figures, and those people politically are now almost extinct, much as Democrats in the Deep South.
No, it's just Susan Collins, and we'll wrap after this, but for instance, I saw a lot of conversation from very conservative MAGA people on social media about like Joni Ernst, when it was looking like she was not going to vote to confirm Pete Hegseth, although she's now said that she would. And they're saying we got to primary her. How dare she betray Trump? Because that's a Republican +7 state. So you could now, if you primary her with like Carrie Lake, she would still, then you would run the risk of losing that seat to a Democrat. But probably if you primaried her with just some other Republican, Republicans would still carry that state. They're never going to primary. Right. They would kill. They would murder anyone who tried to primary Susan Collins because some other Republican can't win in that state. That's being strategic about playing the game, which didn't used to occur. More to talk about, more to come, more to happen, more to transpire on our show today. Please stay with us.